So we are on the beach at Año Nuevo, which is an elephant seal colony. And a lot of the seals here have small flipper tags, which we'll show you a little bit later, that help us keep track of the individual seals. And then when we see a seal with a flipper tag, we can add a dye mark. So if you look at that seal right there, I'm going to use my finger to try to point at it. If you look on the right side of the seal, hopefully you can see a little bit of a dye mark. It says M647. And if you have really, really, really good eyesight, you might be able to see a green flipper tag in the rear flipper of that seal. So that is a 1-year-old seal. It has a flipper tag, green tag M647. And we've been tracking that seal for its entire life so far. So just 1 year. But if I pan you over here to the rest of the seals, you'll see a bunch of older seals. The older ones are bigger, so you can usually tell. I think the oldest seal on the beach today was probably about 6 years old. She's an adult female. And then there's a bunch of kind of 1 and 2 and 3-year-old seals here on the beach. So one of our research questions is, how old do the seals live to be? And it turns out that the oldest seal we've ever tracked was about 21 years old. So she was flipper tagged as a female pup here on the beach. And then we tracked her every single year of her life for 21 years. We saw her over 400 times. And she's one of our favorite seals because she helped us understand not just about her and about elephant seals, but also about the marine environment. So we like studying the seals because they're on land, but they spend most of their time out in the open ocean. And if you can tell that I'm kind of screaming at you, it's because the ocean's really loud today. You can see the waves are actually pretty big, maybe 5 or 6 feet tall or something like that. But the seals come here, they rest a little bit, and then they go back out to the beach and they spend their time out there diving for, on average, about 20 minutes while holding their breath. They dive down, they find some fish to eat it, and then come back up to the surface to breathe. And they do that for somewhere between 5 and 7 months continuously. For the adult females, that means they're leaving the beach in about June, and then they're coming back sometime between now and like February. And when they come back during kind of the middle of winter, they often give birth to pups. And so that 21-year-old seal I was telling you about, we learned a lot about her and her pups by just observing them every day. So a lot of our days are like me and Maddie driving the truck up with a couple of students that we get to work with, and basically getting our cameras and our binoculars and coming out to the beach so that we can figure out which seals are here and we can record a lot of information about them. So hopefully you guys can see both that white flipper tag right there, but also the mark on the side of that seal, W6625. And then you'll see, we told you the waves are kind of big, so the seals are kind of getting thrown around a little bit by the ocean. But let's go ahead and walk over up and above these seals. We'll give you a slightly better view. So I'll talk you through some of what we're seeing over here. You can see some of these males are really curious. They like to play with each other. So these two boys right here are going to have a little fight. And then a lot of these seals are just getting some rest. They've had a long morning already. If you look at this one flipping sand right here, that's actually an adult female. So that's about a 4 or 5-year-old female. We're not exactly sure why some of the females come to the beach during the fall. It's pretty abnormal. Usually they come in January or February to give birth to pups, but we think it might be an adaptation that they have when they skip a year of pupping. So they kind of come a little bit early. They don't have to deal with the chaos of breeding season. They can relax here next to the juveniles, recover some of their body condition, kind of get their energy stores feeling good again, and then hopefully produce a pup the following year. But the seals can dive really deep. They can dive 1,000 meters, which is about 3,000 feet. And the seals can hold their breath for 2 hours. So I told you before that usually they only hold their breath for about 20 minutes on average. But that's just like, you know, going for a short little dive. They can dive up to 2 hours. It's one of the longest dives that any mammal can do while holding its breath, which is really cool. And then those trips are about 7 months long, which means that the seals can collect so much data. The tags last the whole trip. So when they bring those tags back, we can get all sorts of information about how deep the seals were diving, how long they were diving, how much fish they were catching, and all sorts of other stuff. So that's been a really useful part of our research program. And one of the really cool things is we found that bigger seals can dive for longer and hold their breath for longer too. So there seems to be a real benefit of being large. One question that we get a lot is why the seals spend a lot of time by the water. And we don't really know, but one of the reasons we think is that they might get a little bit hot. So they dip in the water. The boys tend to do that. If they fight a lot, they get really hot. Then they'll kind of go in the water to dip. Another reason is during the breeding season, there's often a dominant male that kind of scares the other males away. And so then they'll go into the water to sort of reset before they try to sneak into a group of females again. One thing I want to point out is you can see this male at the end of my finger with sort of the blonde neck. He's starting to develop his nose. So if you look really closely, you can see his nose is starting to droop a little bit. And that's really different than like if we look at, for example, this 1-year-old right here who's looking back at us. He doesn't have that nose droop yet. So that's something the boys get around 3 or 4 years old. And it's another clue that we use to figure out if one of the seals is a male or a female. So I think this morning we probably saw somewhere around like 50 animals with flipper tags or marks. This is one of the groups, but there's also another group a little bit further away. There's some more boys fighting in the water line. There's a mark by the water. If you can look right above my finger, it looks like K127 on the right. And you can see his nose is also starting to droop. He's maybe like 3 years old. So you can see his nose almost touching the ground. Usually they're about 4 or 5 years old when the nose starts to touch the ground. But the females don't have those noses when they're adults. So it's an easy way to tell them apart. I'm going to be quiet for a second and just walk you guys over to a couple of sleeping seals so you can see them up close. So this is what a pretty typical morning looks like for us. Getting to know the seals a little bit more, seeing which ones are here, which ones aren't. Trying to guess why the ones that aren't here, if they're exploring in some other place, or if they've died at sea because they ran into a shark or an orca and couldn't make it past, or maybe they're just going to come to the beach a little bit later. Maybe something about their year made them a little bit behind in their annual cycle. So there's never a shortage of things that we can study about the seals, which is one of the reasons that we really like them. There's that boy with the satellite tag, sticking his head up.